GM, everybody. I'm very excited to be here today with Jack from Khala Research. I'm Joshua from General Tensor. Today we're going to talk about making TAO and Subnet tokens accessible. And I'm Phil from Subnet 98. We are an AI liquidity manager, meaning using the subnet to predict optimal liquidity positions. We got into this in a second, but let's kick off with Jack and what he's doing at Khala Research.
Probably one of the more exciting subnets coming to market in the last few weeks. I love it. Appreciate it, Phil. Glad to be here. One of the co-founders of Khala Research. We publish a bunch of work around crypto X AI. Bittensor is one of the ecosystems we feel the most strongly compelled by. We've been meeting a lot of the subnets, trying to figure out who are the most interesting people doing. I think there's a big bell curve of which ones are well, not even bell curve actually. It's just a distribution of, so there's some really interesting companies being built on Bittensor, and then there's just like a lot of not interesting things. And so a lot of what we're trying to do is find the right projects for the Bittensor community and trying to shine a light on who we feel excited by. So it's great to be here, man.
Awesome. Yeah, it's excited to have you. Josh, you want to give us a little overview about General Tensor and Rubicon?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Phil and Jack. Appreciate it. My name's Joshua Field. I'm one of the co-founders of General Tensor. I work mostly from like a strategic level as the chief strategy officer there. And General Tensor, we are a vertically integrated TAO accumulation company. We run multiple subnets. We help incubate them. We also build them internally ourselves. We run a validator, we have a mining operation, and now we're getting into the product and application space through building. So one of the first products that we built is called Project Rubicon, and it's a canonical bridge for Bittensor to get to other EVM chains and possibly beyond that. The first chain we've integrated is Base, and we did that in partnership with the Coinbase and Base team, and it's powered all by Chainlink CCIP. So Chainlink was very gracious to spend a lot of their time and resources making this happen. Usually they charge an arm and a leg for chain integrations, and we were very lucky to work with them. One of the team members there, Luke, is very bullish on Bittensor and wanted to see people within the EVM world get more access to Bittensor assets. And so that's how this partnership formed and the product of Rubicon was built.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Very, very excited. So again, today we're talking about if TAO and Subnet tokens are lacking accessibility and how can we solve it. And we're super excited. I think we have the right people here in the room to discuss this. So let's start off with analyzing, is TAO and Subnet tokens accessible today for retail and institutional investors? And what is required to increase the adoption of these assets. I think from my perspective, I remember like the first time going into TAO, it is definitely a rabbit hole. There are a lot of words and terms you need to learn. In Bittensor it's called staking. You're not buying token, but you're staking TAO. It's confusing. And then like the first time like going on Finny, like downloading like a Talisman wallet, going to TAO stats. It is a UX. I think people need to get used to. But yeah, keen to hear maybe Josh, you kick us off. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I would share that sentiment for sure. And you know, my other day job and what I spend most of my time on today is working under Contango Digital Assets as the managing partner there, and we have a fund that focuses on decentralized AI. And so Bittensor comes up a lot. We share a lot of deal flow with some bigger funds within the space. And I'm always praising Bittensor and asking other VCs to look at it. And in the kind of early days of us finding Bittensor, there actually was a lot of pushback for a few of the reasons that you mentioned around kind of accessibility and understanding what was really happening under the hood. So I totally can understand that point of view, and I think that Bittensor is a long way to go to be more accessible, including some of the good work that people like Jack are doing by actually looking under the hood, seeing which of these subnet teams are building something with real value and utility, and what's building kind of pure fugazi. And then from like a hardware perspective, or just like, accessing it via infrastructure, I think we got a long way to go. But, the world of crypto over the last 4 or 5 years has been built mostly around the EVM palette and now things like Solana. And so when you're bringing a new chain to the forefront, like something like Bittensor, and you have to build new wallets and new infrastructure around it, it takes time. But we're seeing that happen in the background. And so I'm excited about what the future holds.
Thanks so much. Jack, what do you think?
Maybe on a larger level, we think that smart money, we think that retail is not going to save crypto this year. I think in the last 6 months, there's been a lot of disillusionment on technical progress in crypto broadly. But what we find is that smart money is still here. And if you look at flows, then the question is, what does smart money want to buy? They want things that have real innovation. They want real product market fit. And they want exposure to the smartest developers and entrepreneurs. And so when you think about Bittensor, it doesn't take that high of an IQ to belong TAO itself. But what's quite interesting is that when we speak to our networks, no one participates in the underlying ecosystem, which we find mind-boggling, because you can't really long Solana if you don't understand Jupiter, any of the native dexes, and the rest of the ecosystem. And so in this case, we find that quite contradictory. In this lens, what often happens is this big delta between, okay, a fund holds TAO, and it takes a lot of research, and there's not a lot of information on the subnets. And at that point, there's so much friction that they leave, which is actually, honestly, not a bad thing for incumbents in Bittensor. The high friction means that new money has not arrived, and so you are early. But the same investors need to feel concerned that, well, would you rather buy TAO at these current levels, or would you and have these subnets underpriced, or would you rather have it closely approach fair value and often exceed fair value? Ultimately, my belief is that TAO is going to be another Avalanche, Solana, and so the whole idea is, well, how do we make sure that you're unlocking concentric circles of capital such that there's a great financing environment for new entrepreneurs to build on Bittensor? And so for us, part of the work today is just trying to understand, well, what are these subnets doing it ourselves, doing the work ourselves, and then beyond that, trying to figure out how to communicate this to structured capital. And the whole idea is that, and we've been meeting with a lot of family offices, and I think one of the best descriptions that I've heard on why people are buying TAO right now is primarily as a barbell type of thesis. It's, well, I've already made money in closed source. I've longed NVIDIA. I have some exposure to whatever the $400-500 million round of Anthropic. It makes logical sense for us to deepen that exposure and put 25 basis points, 0.5% of their portfolio into an open source alternative. And just across the board, Bittensor makes a lot of sense. I think on a social level, people like the ecosystem here because you don't want centralized control on every part of your AI stack. You don't want DeepMind to be doing everything for you, and you don't want OpenAI to do everything for you. And so the more vibrancy, the more empowerment of developers themselves ultimately leads to better outcomes for society broadly. And so for us, we're very dedicated to that mission. We are certainly TAO-pilled on the level of we think that open source needs to exist. And we're very encouraged by the fact that people like you, Phil, are building here, but then also that there's large swaths of capital being developed here. I think General Tensor recently raised their round. I think we raised, what, 5 mil. That's a good sign that the ecosystem has found product market fit, that there's a clear P&L and business model such that, again, new concentric circles can understand Bittensor. People who participate in the General Tensor round will then be forced to learn about TAO, and potentially for them to eventually start their own subnets, potentially build their own whatever funds for the ecosystem as well. And so that's the job of all of us to be champions like that. So broadly, I think access is still a problem, but I think we're very optimistic.
Yeah, I think you made a very good point on how can you be bullish on Solana without knowing the Solana ecosystem, right? How can you be bullish on ETH without knowing the ETH ecosystem? And I fully agree with you. Like, people are bullish on TAO, and TAO is very mystical, right? Like, it's like decentralized AI. Like, most people don't really know what is TAO, but it sounds very cool. And then no one has an idea about subnet tokens. And if someone asks me, like, are you bullish on TAO tokenomics? I'm always just saying, yeah, we just need a couple of subnets like breaking through, right? And having really strong tokenomics and people buying the subnet token. That's going to be good for TAO because obviously all the subnet tokens are paired in TAO. But yeah, there's definitely a big issue on or a big disconnect of people understanding the TAO ecosystem, the subnet tokens. And then if we close this loop, we're gonna have, I think, huge increase on the TAO side as well. But cool. Next step would be to like dive more into the information layer of this issue of accessibility of TAO. Jack is another one for you, but Josh, happy to have you chime in as well. How do you think, like, institution, what are they lacking? Like, would they buy on Fanny? They're just lacking information. Give us a little more light on the problems of institutions to get exposure to alpha right now.
Yeah, I think it's information and liquidity. I think information is probably the easiest part, which is today people use TAO stats, Subnet Alpha as the core ways of getting involved in the ecosystem and starting the due diligence process. But ultimately, we have 128 entrepreneurs, which are going to then multiply very quickly, and so there will be a dispersion of all these entrepreneurs doing categorically different things. A liquidity product like yours versus, let's say, Metanova, which is a healthcare product, a drug discovery product. The mechanism is the same, but the market context, the entrepreneurs themselves are completely divergent. And so tracking all of that is really important. And so our job is to kind of put some research towards that. A common piece of feedback that we get is around access to subnets themselves. I have to buy TAO and then I have to swap. What wallet do I use? A lot of these larger smart money, they have fiduciary duties in terms of what type of custodial partners they use. And a lot of the time, there's just no liquidity in a lot of these coins. And obviously, it's a matter of you need to go up, and then volume goes up. The market needs to be better, whatever. The state of the game is quite obvious today, which is they need institutionalization. They need better institutional grade products such that they can understand, but then also execute some of these trades. And so there's a lot of great people working on that, including Rubicon and the whole general Tensor play here. So we're very concerned. I think we need this infrastructure up faster. So that's our perspective.
I'm very excited for like kind of the framework you're putting in place. You told me about. I mean, as you said, like ForeverMoney, for example, we're building in Liquidity using the Bittensor framework of the validators, the miners, and the subnet owner to like have a competition around like managing liquidity, right? Each subnet, what you mentioned on the medical one, used it for a different purpose, and yeah, stoked to see how you can analyze like the usage of miners and the miner performance, and then probably how this relates to the alpha token for institutions and retail.
Yeah. I'll do a quick one here. So at the crux of this is a discussion on valuation of subnets, which is how do you value them? To us, this is not. I reject some of this early notion that revenue and buybacks is the best way to value a subnet. We think that a lot of this is venture, is not public markets, and so. If you want to value venture for smart money, what they're looking for are, okay, there's a qualitative aspects, which is venture is all qualitative, which is what's the market opportunity, what's your speed of product delivery, where has the team come from, those are qualitative factors. And then for us, the thing about subnet investing is that it's a public markets game, obviously, but we don't want to value them as an entrepreneur who's trying to take a multi-month R&D process to instead lose capital and then try to appease the public markets and not reinvest in the products and technologies that they're building. And so for us, what we're trying to put together, so in the next few weeks, we will come to market with a scoring framework. We're calling it a risk assessment index. And the whole idea is we want to be able to value a subnet on, yes, the qualitative side, but in subnet investing, it is about the health of the subnet itself. And so what we want to track in particular are the things that make a subnet healthy. It is things like how much liquidity is in the pool, how active are the miners, how has TAO flow been trending over the last few weeks. These are critical things in, to be honest, educating the public on how Bittensor works. It's actually not about TAO flow. It's actually about pointing them to the right direction. If you were to quiz some of our smart money friends and ask them how would you value it, they would have no idea. They're like, is this like a meme coin launch pad? Like, I see down-only charts. What does that mean? They have no understanding of the bonding mechanisms that occur and how emissions work and why do you need miners. It is actually a very intricate ecosystem. I'm talking to some Tau-pilled guys, obviously, and so I didn't need to tell you this, but oh my god, everyone else looks at this and says, I just buy Tau because it's the highest FDV AI coin. And you're like, you know what? That makes sense. But that actually undermines the smart decisions that they've made already. It is one of the most valued because of the mechanisms that underlie it. And so for us, we're going to come to market with a universal ranking system, choosing on-chain metrics, prioritizing them, grading them. And for us, ultimately, my objective is dispersion, which is I want the good subnets to look good, and I want the corner cutters, the lazy motherfuckers, to be punished for the work that they do. Ultimately, to me, our position is very unique because I don't have a subnet, I don't run a validator, I don't do any of this. And so I'm very happy for us to go out and cause drama, because at the end of the day, Tau is a very, very vindictive community, I've realized. And I like it. I like the energy. You need the passion. But ultimately, if you are short-term minded, I mean, this is also, which is why I think a lot of people in Tau don't like the fact that there's so much change all the time, especially from Kant's. I like it. You need a leader to say, this is how I view it. And if he's wrong, he gets punished and his just ecosystem goes to zero. And so that's what you kind of have to de-risk. But you need someone to say, this is what I believe by my values. And you have to respect them for that. And so some of the decisions that he makes is for the long-term interest in his perspective on what long-term value creation looks like in Bittensor. And so I respect that. And so our job, we resonate with those ideas, which is you want to be here for the long term. You want real technical innovation. You want entrepreneurs who are trying to build very big companies and take on big Web2 TAMs. And so we feel very energized by that. And so our scoring and all of this, like visualization, is very easy that we're going to build. Ultimately, we need it because I think we need to be united in Bittensor such that we could go to a sovereign bank and say, hey, this is why you should be allocated to one of the most exciting open source developer ecosystems. So that's our framework. Josh, would love to hear your response to that as well, and kind of how that relates to your strategy.
Sure. Yeah. Honestly, there was a lot there that I was hoping to respond to, so appreciate it. I think there's a few things. One of the things I thought really interesting about a conversation that I had recently around, you mentioned Solana and having to understand the ecosystem. I know a lot of people, a lot of smart money that are basically allocating to Pump Fund, because it's a business that makes money that they can track on chain, they can track the buybacks, and they understand the business model. And so it's kind of like a levered bet on Solana, without having to take like for sure directional exposure on Solana as like an L1 investment. So I thought that was really cool. And I think you see that with a lot of smart money, that they're starting to get involved in these ecosystems, and you're entirely right. That people are not doing, or smart money is not doing the same thing for Bittensor. And so Jack, I think it's great what you guys are going to be doing with like trying to get under the hood with some of these subnet teams and try to understand, is the incentive mechanism that Bittensor has built, is it actually useful for some of these subnet teams? Like there are a lot of teams that are on two different sides of this, right? Where on one side, there's no need for a subnet. It doesn't even make sense why they have it. And then on the other side, maybe the subnet is actually doing something great. It's improving upon something, but there's no value in the digital commodity that's being improved upon or produced. And so being able to kind of weed out both of those types of builders and founders and teams, and to get to the crux of what teams are really supposed to be on Bittensor, I think that's super important. So I'm excited to see where you guys go with that, and hopefully we can use some of that in some of our investment decision making via Contango or General Tensor and some of the subnet tokens that we buy for our treasury. Beyond that, I think that the one thing that's just going to continue to be very difficult for institutions is really just the infrastructure that sits behind it. If you don't have an ability to like track things on chain, even though I know there are Bittensor explorers, but if it's an entirely new way of looking at an explorer, and you have to get your team up to snuff on what that means, and bring in someone technical to understand it. If you're a hedge fund, sometimes it's easier to just say, let's pass that and move on to the next thing. So that will come. 100%. And then finally, there's just really only one way to buy these subnet tokens, right? It's via a Bittensor wallet. A lot of these teams, even like if you go to a lot of the big custody players, and we spoke to the majority of them, they don't actually offer the ability to buy subnet tokens. I think there's one or maybe like 1.5. That's like the second one's like trying to figure it out. And so if you have all of your other tokens, if you're a hedge fund in with a custody provider that doesn't offer the ability to buy the subnet tokens, you're just not going to do it because you need that. It's part of the regulatory framework that your fund operates on. So there's a lot still that could be desired, but there's also some things that we're trying to do internally at General Tensor, and I know other people within Bittensor are doing to allow investors to get access to these tokens. And I'm seeing some exchanges do some pretty interesting things technically well to list them. We have a couple subnet tokens listed on Mexi. I think there's another bigger exchange around the corner about to list some subnet tokens, which I don't know if I can name, but there's cool stuff coming. But we're definitely a little bit behind on the accessibility front.
Good. Then I think it's also great to lead over to accessibility more, not on the information side of things, but on the really like getting your hands on subnet token. And Josh, you already said like it's difficult for institutions. There are little custody providers providing the service. We have some centralized exchanges listing the first ones. But yeah, I'm stoked to hear more about your vision, like bringing like subnet tokens and TAO via XTAO to Base and making it accessible on, I would say, probably next to Solana, one of the most successful chains in the ecosystem.
Sure. Yeah, I think the kind of the background here was that we kind of heard what everyone else was saying is like, how do I buy these things? I have to set up another wallet, and it just seemed a little bit ridiculous. And a lot of retail investors really don't understand what it means to have a MetaMask or a Ravi wallet or a Bittensor Talisman wallet. They just have one or two centralized exchange accounts and they buy everything there. And so when I heard that the team at Coinbase was building Base app, where anybody with a Coinbase account could download an app and then immediately have access to all of the tokens listed on the Base L2, and you could access them via Aerodrome or other dexes there, I thought we had a really interesting opportunity to bridge over some of the top subnet tokens to Base and let people buy them using their Base wallet accounts. So that's why we decided to go with Base first. Luckily for us, the AI team at Base was super interested in the idea. There's a lot of other AI teams building there on that L2, and so it made a lot of sense for them. And then we got really lucky with Chainlink that wanted to come in and partner and help us build this out technically. So what that actually looks like today is we have Rubicon. It's a site that you can go to. You can connect your Bittensor wallet and you can connect your EVM wallet. And you can essentially put your subnet tokens through the bridge. It ends up going through first to Subtensor EVM. And then from there, we bridge it over to Base. And then potentially we could do other chains as well in the future. The reason why we started with just one is because you don't want to actually fragment liquidity too much in the early days, or there's no real point to it. There's no real reason. There's only so much liquidity to go around for these type of things, and so we wanted to basically centralize all that liquidity on Base. But as Bittensor starts to gain kind of more market share, more mind share with individuals around the world, and hopefully there's a lot more buying power and volume happening on Base, we're potentially looking at doing this with other ecosystems as well, including mainnet Ethereum, potentially Avalanche, or Solana if we want to go that direction as well. So right now you can go to Aerodrome, you can set up your Ravi, your MetaMask wallet, you can buy these subnet tokens, you can hold them. And then the cool thing about why we decided to also do this, if you are somebody that wants to buy these tokens, is that you can actually use them to put inside these Aerodrome pools and earn additional fees. So it's actually a liquid staked version of the subnet token. So you're still earning the APY when your token is being staked on our validator on the Finny side. And then you can also earn the additional APY on the Base side via Aerodrome pools. And together, hopefully you're actually earning more in APY than you would if you just held those subnet tokens on Finny. So that's what we've been able to do. We've been able to give a lot of investors on Base and via Coinbase access to these assets. And now it's just our job really to educate them on what they actually are, because that seems to be another bottleneck for people is like, why am I actually buying this? What does it do? We got a long way to go to educate people, but Bittensor is a complicated place, so it makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. Since I think it launched a couple of months ago, right? Like subnet tokens are already live since a while on Base via Aerodrome. What do you say are like the most like the biggest barriers to adoption? How did you see like traction of these tokens being on Base?
Yeah, I think just to Jack's point earlier, there's just people just don't know what they are, right? Like we are in the Bittensor world, which I love because it's like it's fervent. Like to Jack's point, like people are intense, and they're really smart, and they take the time to actually research what's going on under the hood, and that's why they buy these subnet tokens. You know, people that have a Coinbase account, like one of the most traded assets there is XRP, and not as a knock to the guys at Ripple. But like, what does it do? Like, what is the point of that? And so we have a long way to go to educate people. They need to actually understand what these tokens are and why they'd want to buy it. What is the hype cycle behind it? People understand TAO, right? It's like, you know, it's open source AI, it's decentralized AI, and that's about as deep as they go. To get them to go one step deeper and actually buy some of the subnet tokens there, like how do you explain to somebody that knows nothing really about crypto and AI, like what is distributed training? You know, you could probably explain to them at a high level, but it's difficult. And so when I think this actually ends up ramping up in a big way is when these subnet teams start spinning out huge amounts of revenue based off the digital commodities that they're producing, because that's something that everybody can understand is like, put your money on the table. Like, what is the revenue that this thing's producing? And oh my God, it's like so much more capital efficient than its centralized counterparty. I think those are ideas that people can understand a little bit better. And I think that's when people will start to buy subnet tokens. So the real answer is just education.
Cool. No, I fully agree. I mean, we have the infrastructure now. It is accessible. There is obviously limited liquidity. That's not that owners providing liquidity right now. But in general, the infrastructure is there. Cool. Jack, any thoughts on TAO, on subnet tokens on Base? You see this as a major unblock for retail investors to come in?
Absolutely. I think to make it as accessible as possible, it's really important. And so I would feel scared as a subnet owner if the only way to access it was having to go through the current traditional forms of buying subnets. Yeah, how do you feel about this, Phil? Obviously, you've started Infinite Money now, and it's been a couple of weeks. What has your journey been like, starting all of this and building now in Bittensor?
So ForeverMoney, the idea was coming from actually like the other project, CreatorBit, and the need of like managed liquidity. I think like V3 liquidity pools are around in a while, so they allow for concentrated liquidity. While they're around for a while, like most projects still use V2 or they use V3 with a full range liquidity just because it's easy. It's kind of complicated to plan your liquidity, like how much you want to put at different price ranges. And you're facing issues like impermanent loss when the price goes up a lot or like goes down a lot, you go out of range. And then you sit there just on one token. And we saw this as a big problem. And we had a subnet and we thought, okay, cool. We don't have a quant team to like solve the issue of planning your liquidity perfectly. Why not using in the subnet where you have like access to like a whole network of miners who can come in, compete for the challenge of providing like ranges or predicting ranges, optimal ranges for liquidity provisioning. And then the subnet can execute on these ranges. And yeah, now we have been working with Rubicon. Our token is also ready to go to Base and Aerodrome. We still haven't executed on it yet because we still also want to like solve the information problem, right? Like having people waiting on Base because they understand what the subnet is and what it does. So we're going to first start working with some of the subnets which are already on Base and other token pairs there to provide more efficient liquidity. So what it actually means is right now, right, if your liquidity is provided in full range, and you spread all the capital from 0 to infinity, right? So like people buy, it spikes up a lot or it goes down a lot because it's like thin liquidity at a certain price point. With the subnet, we can help you to like place thicker liquidity in strategic ranges, and then help you also to like automatically move up and down the liquidity, depending on where the price goes. And by this, we are hoping, or like we are aiming to allow on the one side subnets, if they expand to Base and Aerodrome, to provide thicker liquidity, so people and institutions and whales cannot go in with like size, go in and out. And on the other side, for TAO holders, or subnet token holders, or like any other token, basically provide additional yield on their token. So like the LP fees can be quite profitable. The only issue is like often they get like the earnings from LP fees get destroyed by what's called impermanent loss. Means if the price goes up too much or too little or too down too much, you actually end up with just holding one asset, which is then worse than just holding the tokens without providing liquidity. So like our angle here in the making TAO and Subnet tokens accessible is to provide efficient liquidity for institutions and whales to go and buy these Subnet tokens on Base or other chains.
We need it, man. That sounds great, Phil. I'm excited for that.
The private comp would be something like Arrakis Finance. They essentially run a auto balancing algorithm for the XLP pools, right? And from my understanding, Phil, that's a pretty small team, but I think it's like a 4-person team based out of Switzerland. I remember they raised 4 or 5 mil in December 2022. I think it was Excel, Uniswap. There's like a whole bunch of big funds behind them. But wow, I remember they had almost $2 billion in TVO. TVO being defined as pools they were managing. And so that was, I don't know how much money they made per year, but that seems pretty big. Is that the best comp to think about in terms of Subnet 98 here?
Yeah, that's definitely a good comparison. I think there are like other like market making teams, obviously in the industry, just like centralized companies who provide liquidity on decentralized exchanges to earn yield or earn fees. But I think the main advantage we can bring here is we can make it a competition, right? Like what I absolutely love about Bittensor is like the idea of like taking this very traditional organizational framework of having managers, the validators who check on KPIs, and then having the miners, the employees, which are actually doing the work, and making it open, accessible for everyone to join. So what like traditional market making firms or the other liquidity managers do inside of a company, we can bring the competition of like who is predicting the best ranges to the open market, score them, and then execute them, which I think solves the problem of that, if team member get lazy or like, they're not working as hard anymore because they already made it, they don't want to push anymore. In the open market, at any time, anyone can come in with their open claw agent or like, and like take share from the current winners. And we're excited to see the competition and the constant increasement of performance on the liquidity management side. Then I would say it's time to zoom out, the bigger picture. Any thoughts? Like I think one thing is going to be at least interesting is to see if like chain abstractions coming in, how things going to progress with like having like Subnet tokens and TAOs on different chains. Is it needed? Are there any problems? Maybe just you have any concerns with like spreading Subnet and TAO on different chains?
No, as long as you have like a good kind of like market making arbitrage, cabal of people that are willing to make markets cross chain, I don't think it's an issue. I think it's probably a net good for the ecosystem overall. In the same way that when Bitcoin first came out, the number of exchanges is listed on correlated directly with how well the price did, right? So I think you have to worry about fragmenting liquidity a little bit for sure. But as long as you can scale that with the number of kind of market participants, like on the market making side, then I think we should be fine. I think you're starting to see that more and more. So you'll see in the next little bit, a number of exchanges start to list these alpha tokens, at least the top kind of 3 or 4 that have decent volume and liquidity. And then as the ecosystem of Bittensor continues to grow, I think you'll see more of those. So I'm not super worried. I think it's kind of happening in a pretty organic way. It's not happening too quick. It's kind of happening at the right time.
Do you see exchanges also listing them on Base or like having the ability to withdraw and deposit from Base?
It would be easier for them to do that, and I would hope so. I mean, we're having some conversations with them. I know that the holdback, the bottleneck for them at the moment is really just like technical concerns around listing them, because to send and receive Subnet tokens, it's really not possible. You have to unstake, and it's a bit of an interesting technical problem that they're dealing with. But I know that they've worked on it with a couple of them, and I think that there's kind of like advancements being made. So that's potentially a good idea, Phil. I'll talk to some of our exchange contacts to see if that's kind of a workaround, and potentially we can work with the Subnet teams and the exchanges to get that done.
Yeah, I think Base, there's just so much tooling from also for investors like Telegram bots to like automatically trade. which still needs to be built on Finny on the TAO chain. So I'm super excited about this. Jack, what's your standpoint on that?
I think that these exchanges will list us when we have enough volume. Exchanges don't really have a particular point of view on whether they believe in the technology or not, as long as they have some type of, someone on the inside has some interest in AI, or they just view it as a volume type play for them. So for me, I think it's just a matter of time. I think on a stager perspective, we are so small in terms of daily volume. So over time, I think that'll improve anyways. So
sweet. Thanks so much for joining and providing these insights on the accessibility of TAO and Subnet tokens. Very, very excited for Rubicon to scale them on chain, making them accessible for base users and the broader EVM ecosystem, and for Jack and Khala for providing the necessary research information for people to actually go in and buy them. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Subnet 98, baby.